Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, is here. We'll talk to him about a big rally taking place this Saturday in Virginia. All the details on that ahead. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It was back in 2020 that a soldier called Vanessa Guillén went missing, and quite unfortunately, she was murdered. And her body was found in pieces later, and President Trump called their family to the White House, treated them with utter reverence. And today, that's the subject of a piece in The Atlantic run by a major Kamala Harris donor, looking to cast aspersions on President Trump, suggesting that he had said behind closed doors something racist about the fallen soldier, and that she was bleeping Mexican, all this nonsense. Here's how CBS's Norah O'Donnell presented it last night.
2 weeks from Election Day as the final battleground sprint is underway. Every hour matters for these candidates as they try to reach as many voters as possible in the key states that will decide this election. For Donald Trump, that meant speaking at a roundtable in Florida at his golf club, courting the Latino vote after that campaign stop. A new report that Trump, while president, used the F word to describe a murdered Mexican-American soldier. That story is that Trump scoffed at the price of a funeral he offered to pay for Private Vanessa Guillén, something Trump's team tonight denies.
For more on this story, I want to bring in someone who was actually in the room with President Trump and the Guillén family. Theo Wold is here. He's a former deputy assistant to President Trump. He's a current board member at American Moment, and he joins us on the phone. Theo, good to have you with us, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Vince. It's good to be with you.
It's an amazing story. We were playing some of the audio of the Oval Office meeting that you sat in on in 2020, but tell us the truth. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, from my vantage point, it was an interesting turn of events because I was actually there in the room to help translate for the president. I'm not a translator by vocation. I was a advisor to the president on domestic policy issues. But if you recall, Vince, and your listeners probably remember this, at that time, a number of the president's private conversations with foreign leaders had been leaked, and the assumption in the White House was the leakers were the translators of those conversations, and they had given over sensitive and classified information for public consumption. And so the president really wanted to have this meeting with the Guillén family, and he wanted it to be private. So I got a call from the chief of staff then, Mark Meadows, early that morning and said, Theo, we understand you're a fluent Spanish speaker. Do you mind coming in and helping the president out? And that's how I was there in the room. And what I saw was, number one, an incredibly poised and truly confident American family. The Guilléns are a family that any American can be proud to call them fellow citizens and members of our national community. They raised a daughter who wanted to serve her country in the armed services, and then she has two remarkable sisters who have become essentially advocates for improving the way DOD and the armed services handle issues of sexual violence and violence reporting. But they were there, incredibly poised, and the president was deeply touched by her story, by Army Specialist Vanessa Guillén's story of service, of her family, and really, for me, it came home that this was a commander-in-chief who was concerned about one of his soldiers. He wanted to know what happened, why hasn't DOD and the Army been forthcoming, why hasn't the family received the transparency that they need? And then, the other thing that people kind of memory hold in this entire discussion that's unfolded in the last 24 hours is, and you probably recall this, at that time, there were 25 soldiers who had died at Fort Hood, including by homicide and by suicide. There were 14 soldiers who were fired from the Army or suspended for violence. I mean, really heinous violence at Fort Hood. And then not far from where they found Army Specialist Guillén's remains, they also found later the remains of another missing serviceman, Army Specialist Morales. And so this was happening in the context of, hey, what is going on at Fort Hood? So
Yes.
The interest from President Trump was genuine and heartfelt.
Okay, so in that, let me just play audio so people can get a sense of this. This is that day in 2020, President Trump meeting with Vanessa Guillén's family. You were there helping to translate for, I believe it's her mother primarily, right? And for the President of the United States?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, and here's some of the audio from that meeting.
You mean you haven't had a funeral? Because this is quite a while now.
Yeah, right.
Because I even saw it quite a while ago.
Correct.
And because you don't have the body yet,
No remains. That's all we're.
but they have the body.
The remains.
Okay.
It's just a disgrace. And how can someone be capable of doing that?
No, it's a terrible thing. When would you like to have the funeral? When?
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible, I agree. As soon as possible with the funeral. We make sure that happens.
Ya,
Okay,
es que
please?
tienen que entregármela ya.
Thank you.
Ya porque es.
Where will
es
you have the
hermano.
funeral? Do you know?
Houston.
In Houston?
Yeah.
All right. And if I can help you out with the funeral, I'll help you out. I'll help you out financially. I'll help you.
I think the military will be taking care of it.
Good. They'll do military. That's good. If you need help, I'll help you out.
Thank you, President.
Okay. If they need something, we'll take care. We'll make sure she is very respected.
Okay, so there's a lot of interesting things going on here. President Trump's empathy is crystal clear in the audio we just heard, and the family seems appreciative. President Trump makes an offer of personally paying for the expenses of the funeral, and I believe that's the family attorney who responds, there's no need for that because the military will be covering the cost of the funeral. Am I following all of that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right. The only thing I'd say is I think the voice that we heard is from Lara Guillén, who Vanessa Guillén's sister, and I mentioned this on one of the social media posts I made on this whole incident, which was she was incredibly poised. I mean, I don't know many people who walk right into the Oval Office and are able to look the President of the United States in the eye and say, hey, I need your support in passing this legislation, the I Am Vanessa Guillén Act, and we need to do right by my sister. Then bat an eyelash, and that is one of really remarkable features of this family. So I think that's whose voice you heard there.
Yes.
And what's interesting is what preceded this moment that the press was allowed in for was the president asked before. We had about a 23-minute conversation with the family. And at the very end of that, the president turned to Mr. and Mrs. Guillén and said, look, hey, do you want the press to come in or not? Because this is your rodeo. And if you need them to carry this story so we can put more pressure on DOD and the Department of the Army to move quicker on this, that's great. If you want to use this to raise awareness of the I Am Vanessa Guillén Act, great. It's your call, though. And I'm going to tell you, the press, they're always going to spin something, in unpredictable ways. And the family said, yes, it would be helpful if we brought the national press in because then they can highlight this and we can speak to them and raise awareness of what happened to my sister, our daughter, and raise awareness of what we want to see done as far as changes in the way these kinds of acts of violence are mentioned. So, the Jeff Goldberg account in The Atlantic was, well, the president was trying to grandstand off of the violence done to this young woman and use the family as a prop. Not at all what happened. And as you noted, Vince, you can hear it in the interchange between the president and the family over, covering the cost of the funeral and whether or not it will be a military burial or provided through private means.
So a couple other pieces that follow that event. One of them is that even the Atlantic acknowledges that some of the costs of the funeral were indeed covered by the Army. And in fact, the Army offered to allow Guillén to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Some of the expenses of the funeral were covered by donations from concerned Americans, I guess, who wanted to help. And also, as I understand it, President Trump fought to make sure that she had a line of duty death designation so that her family would be the recipient of all the benefits that come with that designation. Do I have all of that right?
That's exactly right, Vince. Yep.
And so, in other words, so he carried the torch for her beyond that meeting rather than the way that the Atlantic represents President Trump today is that he was angry at her, that her death was expensive. Quote, it doesn't cost $60,000 to bury a bleeping Mexican, yelling at Mark Meadows, don't pay it. Can you believe it? Bleeping people trying to rip me off. None of that makes sense in the context of a funeral that apparently was paid for by the Army, donations, and the efforts by President Trump to get that family the financial assistance they deserved.
Well, it only makes sense, Vince, if you acknowledge that the left is desperate to discredit Donald Trump as commander-in-chief. right? At this hour right now, what they want to do is say the man is unfit to execute the full duties of the office of president, including being commander-in-chief of the armed services. And they've been at this for years, trying to, build this narrative. And what I saw with my own eyes, again, was, as I described it to my wife when I came home from work that day, it's the closest I'll ever come to being in the room with Lincoln. This is, when we hear the stories and we read the letters that Lincoln wrote to the surviving family, the widows, the mothers of deceased soldiers in the Civil War, the account wasn't just of a commander-in-chief. It was of the father of the nation, deeply concerned about the well-being of someone who put their life on the line, who put on the uniform to serve this country. And that's what I saw. I saw the commander-in-chief who wasn't just, this is a family, it's another headline. It was, what happened to my soldier, and why aren't we getting answers? Because enough is enough. How many good soldiers do we need to sacrifice to violence, to suicide, before we have a process to protect our men and women in uniform?
So this Atlantic piece, which we've well established now is a gigantic piece of slander, it also makes allegations that President Trump envies Hitler and that he wants to be a fascist dictator and that he demands loyalty to him and not the Constitution. Theo Wold, you worked with the guy. What do you make of those claims?
Never in a million years. Never in a million years. I mean, look, I think Mercedes Schlapp, who was a colleague of mine in the White House, put this perfectly on X this afternoon. We are pretty certain that most of these anonymous sources for Goldberg are the same anonymous sources he relied on in the Normandy D-Day smear attack on President Trump a few years ago. It's General Kelly and people who were in General Kelly's orbit who are, still trying to belittle the president and demean his legacy and his continued aspiration to serve the country with these silly stories about, he admires the Hitler's generals, but didn't know who Rommel was. Never saw anything to the effect. What I saw instead was that President Trump has a deep and abiding love for the men and women who put on the uniforms. That's why General Kelly was selected to lead DHS, because of President's love and admiration for the men and women of our armed services. That's why General Mattis was selected for DOD, because he genuinely admired men and women, and that love and admiration grew out of his long-standing appreciation for the heroes of World War II, like General MacArthur and General Eisenhower. So the idea that suddenly he becomes this aficionado of Hitler's generals, I mean, it's a baseless smear. But worse, as I said earlier, it's really an attempt by the left to discredit the work that President Trump did as commander-in-chief. Because, look, he advocated for the very thing and got it across the finish line that Democrats have been talking about for years, creating reporting structures in the armed services that protect our men and women in uniform. The I Stand with Vanessa Guillén Act was supported by President Trump, and it is now law. And that was done under his efforts, under his leadership. And that steals one of those leading talking points that Democrats have, they've complained about it, they've moaned about it for decades, but did nothing to actually make it a reality. And President Trump did.
And lastly, by way of brief summary, I mean, think about the way the Biden-Harris administration has treated the troops, the forced COVID vaccinations, the running out of chaplains who say that they have a religious exemption and they say, I don't care, they do that. To them, the peril in which our service members are placed with each passing day as we get closer to World War III, the 13 fallen service members in Afghanistan who lost their lives during that disastrous exit, and then, of course, what's happening here domestically as they lead an administration that's imprisoning their political opponents, that's threatening to take legal action against people like Elon Musk merely for supporting free speech and voter registration, who's it's just an endless series of tyrannical abuses, and yet they're pointing their finger at Trump and saying that he's the threat to this country, Theo Wold.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I'd put it at the end here, Vince, is just to say, look, the elites want to protect each other. They want to perpetuate a false narrative, and it's the true, hardworking, truly noble common citizens of America, people like Lara Guillén, who went on social media and said, everything you're saying, Jeff Goldberg, is a lie. I was there. She was my sister. And guess what? Today, I cast my vote for Donald Trump.
Amen. All right. Hey, Theo Wold, thank you. Excellent perspective. Really appreciate you sharing it with us today. Look, there's a really important lesson in all of this about the early vote, a very important lesson. Here's what it is. Trump is doing very well in all of the data right now on the early vote. Very well. What the left is scared of is that that's going to produce a Trump victory. What they want to do is create hesitation among the voters. They don't want people to turn out for Trump, so they tell these lies, and they get the media to carry their water. And so here's what your mission is. Get everyone you know out to early vote now. If there's even a person in your life who would, for a moment in weakness, take seriously people like CBS and say, well, maybe I shouldn't vote for Trump. Get them out now. Get that vote locked in before the left cooks up something else to make your hesitant friend hesitate. Don't let that happen. The early vote is all the more important in a world where they're trying to rig your mind. Quickly move. Quickly. Governor Glenn Youngkin will rally this weekend in Virginia, and he's going to join us next to talk about it. Good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Just under 13 days to go in this election. And all hands on deck, including in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where President Trump and all the Republicans on the ballot have made it more competitive than the left would like. Joining us now to discuss that and a big rally this weekend is the governor of the Commonwealth, Glenn Youngkin, is here. Hello, sir. Good to talk to you again.
Vince, great to be with you. And listen, that's exactly what's happening in Virginia, which is a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points and that I was fortunate enough to win by 2 a year later, is tight. And that's why we got to get the vote out. And that's why this rally, which is at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning in Chesterfield County, Lara Trump's going to come and be with us. And we're going to get everybody fired up and then get everybody out to vote, because I'm telling you, if we get everybody out to vote, we win.
Vote early, win Virginia rally taking place in Chesterfield, Virginia. How is the early vote going right now, Governor?
I think it's going really well. We started in 2021 telling everybody, vote early, make a plan to vote early.
Yes.
And we've done really well as Republicans in Virginia. And it is great to see the national take up by Republicans to vote early. President Trump is telling everybody to vote early. Get out and vote early. Listen, we get 45 days in Virginia, which is a long time, but I'd much rather have everybody take the full 45 days and get everybody out than have somebody miss it on Election Day. And what I firmly believe is that we're going to get 1 or 2% more people voting because we voted early than we would everybody else showing up on Election Day, just because they'll not have a sick child or something happen at work or whatever it is. So I am encouraging everybody, get out and vote, make your voice heard, cast a ballot for the future of our nation. We got to get strength back in the White House with Donald Trump. We've got to flip our Senate, and we've got to give Speaker Johnson a bigger majority. That means we got to win down in the second. We got to flip the seventh. We got work to do, and that's going to require everybody to get out and vote.
Yeah. I know that obviously getting people to early vote is really important, and that is such a great message you've been carrying for the past few years. On this show, we like to dive into the data, so I'll ask you if you've looked at it. To what extent are you concerned that Republicans, although they look good in some of the early vote, that we may be cannibalizing Election Day voting? What do you make of that?
Yeah, so first of all, I think we're seeing a much higher percentage of the ballot that has been cast be Republican. Yeah. And to put it in context, I think back in 2020, the early voting, which was a lot because it was COVID, so it was artificially inflated, I think, was 65-35 Democrat to Republican. And I think we're inside 55-45, even with all of the mail-in ballots. So I think we have really tightened this thing up from an early voting standpoint. Second of all, I believe that we see a lot more folks that haven't voted showing up to vote. A lot of folks who haven't voted, and it's the same phenomena that we saw in 2016, which is where people who had not participated are participating because they're worried about the future of our nation. They want a secure border. They want a strong America. They don't want wars in Ukraine and Israel and China and Taiwan. They want to have an economy that lifts up everybody and doesn't unleash inflation that steals their hard work, their hard-earned money. That's what people want, and I think we're seeing a real shift with folks who might not have participated historically, voting, and that's a big thing.
That is a big deal. So it's not just like election day voters in the past who are showing up early, although there are a lot of those. It's never voters who are showing up early.
Yeah, exactly right. There's two big things that are happening. One, people who have not voted over the last 4 years are voting. That's a big deal. And then second of all, I think we will have, out of 100 people who say they're going to vote and then we lose one or two of them on election day for some reason, we'll get those one or two who will vote because they've had a chance to vote early. So we will have new people voting, and we're going to get a higher number of people voting relative to what we've had historically. I think high turnout is good for Republicans. It's good for Republicans.
Yes, and the data demonstrate that in a bunch of ways, including among people who are not registered to vote. There's a lot of every indicator is that if they do become registered, that they would vote for Trump by and large, vote for the Republicans. How much of an indicator do you think Virginia's results will be for the rest of the country? Even if, let's say, President Trump doesn't win the state, which is what the predictions are at the moment, the conventional wisdom says. If he makes it close, if Republicans are close in the Commonwealth, what does that tell you about the rest of the country on Election Day?
Yeah, I think it's huge for the rest of the country. I mean, as I said, Biden won Virginia by 10, and it is tight. I mean, President Trump is coming up on the outside. He's scraping some paint on the way, and he's coming up on the outside, and Virginia's so much tighter than the Democrats want it to be, and that's why we're pushing so hard. And we got a real shot. Yeah. But what that means, just being close, is that Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. I mean, those are the states that just literally 2 months ago in August, people were wringing their hands, and I was telling them, listen, don't pay attention to August polls. This thing is going to be decided in the last 6 to 8 weeks. And down the stretch is going to matter. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Policy is winning. Listen, she tried to run a campaign on vibes, and everybody said, wait a minute, but where's the substance? And there's President Trump talking about securing the border, talking about making America safe, talking about how to build a rip-roaring economy that lifts up everyone where we have low inflation and high growth, talking about how to project strength around the world with no wars. And she can't talk about any of that. And that is the difference right now. And down the stretch, Americans and Virginians want substance, and they want to have strength in the White House. And that's why these last couple of weeks matter so much.
Can you talk about, from your perspective, Governor Youngkin, the difference between these two campaigns? You mentioned that Kamala Harris was trying to ride on vibes. That's kind of like riding on vapors in your car. It's not going to work, really. You need actual gasoline. How do you see these two campaigns and the energy that they're projecting? Because I'm looking at President Trump's schedule, and it's frenetic. He's everywhere. He's trying to do rallies all over the place. He's on all these podcasts. He's doing a really robust campaign schedule. Yesterday, Kamala Harris didn't get on the campaign trail at all. She spent an entire day not on the campaign trail. How do you view these two campaigns?
Yeah, well, you just summarized it. I mean, we have President Trump who is working for America, and he is asking for America to elect him, and he's doing it personally. He is at McDonald's. He is holding rallies. He's doing media interviews. He's holding town halls only with women audiences because he wants to hear what they have to say. And listen, Kamala Harris is just trying to vibe this way in. And, they've shifted their whole strategy now from trying to win on vibes to trying to win on anger. There's no substance. And this is an America and a Virginia that want substance. They want to know what they're going to do to win. And the bottom line is that the reason why Kamala Harris doesn't talk about substance is because the track record over the last 3.5 years has been failure after failure after failure on all the issues that Americans and Virginians care about. Can you build us a strong economy that'll lift up everybody? And the answer is nope. We're going to unleash inflation again because she says she's not changing a thing. Can you find some way to make America safe so we don't have 10 to 15 million illegal immigrants coming in and causing chaos? Nope, because what they've done is leave the border open, and that's what they plan on continuing to do. Yeah. Can you project strength around the world where we wouldn't have wars all over the place? No, because their track record says they have not done that, and she's not going to change anything. Virginians and Americans want change. They want something different. And President Trump is delivering not only on showing up, but also on the substance of the message.
Governor Youngkin, what do you make of President Biden and Vice President Harris's remarks about President Trump in the last 24 hours? President Biden said in New Hampshire that Donald Trump needs to be locked up before he tried to walk it back after that moments later saying, politically. And then meanwhile, Kamala Harris today said that Donald Trump is a fascist who would turn the military against American citizens. We're reaching hysterical levels here.
Well, it's representative of a campaign that's in free fall. They literally are getting desperate. As I said, they started with the campaign of vibes, and that wasn't working. And because they have no substance and they can't talk about any of the issues, now they're going full on attack. And at the end of the day, Virginians and Americans want substance. They want to know that what you're going to do is going to work for them and make their lives better. And that's what President Trump represents. Strength back in the White House, strong border, strong economy, strong America. That's what they want. We're also seeing it in the Senate races and, of course, the congressional races. Listen, we've got a really tight one in the 7th.
Yes.
And Derek Anderson is doing a great job running in the 7th. And I would encourage everybody, please participate, support his campaign, get out and vote. We have a chance to flip that seat. And so we've got to get that done. And then, of course, we've got to reelect Jen Kiggins down in the 2nd. And, Hung Cao is running hard. He's running hard, and President Trump does really well in Virginia. Hung Cao is going to be right there with him on the ballot box. So, listen, and finally, let me just say, and what we're seeing in the big competitive Senate races in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Montana, these races, all of us, Ohio, these races are all of a sudden really bending towards the Republican contenders, and it has everything to do with substance and strength and where people want America to go, as opposed to vibes and anger and lack of policy and weakness.
One last thing on the election, then I have a question for you on gangs today, because I know you just announced a big initiative on this. But on the election, the Justice Department recently sued the Commonwealth over your very wise decision to remove non-citizens from the voter rolls. Are there any updates on that saga?
Well, first of all, the substance of their case really undermines the Department of Justice's credibility. Full stop. It's political. They launched this 25 days before a presidential election. I wrote my EO back at the beginning of August. This is a law that's been in place since 2006 and applied by Republican and Democrat governors. The last two Democrat governors applied this law in the 90-day period, which is one of their arguments that it shouldn't be in the 90-day period. They did it, and the Justice Department didn't say anything. And finally, the Justice Department back in 2006 fully reviewed this and approved it back in 2006. So this law, which is on our books, which I have no discretion, if someone walks into a DMV, and they identify themselves as a non-citizen, and let's just say that again, they self-identify as a non-citizen, and they end up on our voter rolls, either purposely or by accident, then we have a process to notify them, and they get 14 days to come back and affirm they are a citizen, and if they don't do that, they come off. And there's one last catch-all, which, of course, in Virginia, you can same-day register and cast a provisional ballot. So there are safeguards against someone inappropriately being removed from the voter rolls. These folks are self-identifying. It's been on the books for 18 years and applied. And here's the Justice Department deciding 25 days before a presidential election that they want to file suit against Virginia for doing something that is consistent with the U.S. Constitution, the Virginia Constitution, Virginia law. And by the way, these folks have to identify as non-citizens. They shouldn't be on the voter rolls to begin with. Right. And so that is my strong view. We are going to fight this because I want to make sure that Virginians understand that I stand for accurate, fair, and safe elections. We have paper ballots, we have counting machines, not voting machines. We have custody of those ballots. The drop boxes are monitored 24/7. We have clean voter rolls. And I want to make sure that everybody has a full faith in our election process, because that's my job as governor.
Governor Youngkin, finally today, you've issued an executive order, Executive Order 41. You say it's to launch the next level partnership to combat gangs and gang violence across the Commonwealth. This is actually of immense concern to so many Virginians, the status of gangs and gang violence in their communities. What can you share with us?
Well, let me just begin with the fact that we've got a problem, right? 650 identified gangs operating in Virginia, and the violence level and the activities of those gangs have become far more intense. drug trafficking, human trafficking, and, of course, the crime that comes with that all the way up to murder. I mean, we just had 2 MS-13 gang members in the course of the last 5 months, both convicted of murder. This is what's happening. And with the infiltration of the millions and millions of illegal immigrants across the border and the Mexican drug cartels stepping up their activities in America, this is of grave concern. We have had a huge effort over the last 2 years with Operation Bold Blue Line, which has been a targeted effort in our most violent communities to bring down violent crime, and we've been successful. Murder is down 34% in those communities. We've had a huge effort to interdict the drug trade, and so what we call Operation Free Virginia has been working in 2 separate big efforts, collaborating federal, state, and local resources, and we've seized 2,000 pounds of illegal drugs, 450 pounds of fentanyl. Let me just tell you, that's enough to kill every Virginian nearly 10 times over.
Yes.
Thousands of arrests, $2.8 million of seized assets. That's, the drug seizures are worth over $2 billion in street value. It works. And so we are taking this collaborative effort and focusing it on gang activity. And it will bring federal, state, and local resources on a collaborative basis to focus on unpicking the statewide activity. We have crime that happens one place that's connected someplace else. We have drug seizures one place that's connected someplace else. The collaboration works, and we're going to get on this because Virginia must be the safest place in America, and our gang activity has really got me concerned.
And Governor Youngkin, how much harder is it to have that kind of collaboration when you have places like Fairfax County that insist on being, quote, sanctuary counties and protecting illegals in the prison system?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, which is why the federal resources have to be able to collaborate with state resources. And that's one of our big efforts, and we've seen it work. And we have seen it when we have federal resources and state resources and the local resources working together. We have tremendous outcomes. But sometimes we just have to go do the work. And that's one of the reasons why Attorney General Miyares started Operation Ceasefire back at the beginning of our collective administrations, because it allowed us to work with federal prosecutors. And when there is a violent crime that's committed with a gun, then all of a sudden we have a new level of prosecution with someone who is double badged, if you will, both in his office and in the federal courts in order to prosecute in the federal courts so that we can bring people to justice. This is just what we have to do, because I'm going to tell you, our law enforcement heroes work too hard. They take too many risks. They're too committed to allow their arrests not to go prosecuted. All
right. Governor Youngkin, thank you so much for your time today. Generous with it. And again, you'll be available at this rally on Saturday alongside Hung Cao, Rob Wittman, Lara Trump. It's going to be great. That'll be in Chesterfield, Virginia. It's the Vote Early, Win Virginia rally. Thank you, Governor Youngkin.